Welcome to another episode of French Toast Fridays. My name is Andy Jolivet, and I am joined by my friend Tyler McCarty. What's up, amigo?
Hola.
Behind the scenes is our friend Marco Zitzer. What is up, buddy? We didn't give him a microphone today. He doesn't get microphone privileges this time. The three of us are friends who each have a business that allows us to do meaningful work in the world, and this podcast was born right here at this table during a conversation we had at Tyler's house. We were talking about all the people we know who are living great stories that deserve to be shared. Tyler made us French toast that morning, and it was a Friday. Whether you're tuning into this from your commute, on the treadmill, or while taking a moment to unwind, we want to remind you that life is best when it's simple and sincere, with plenty of syrup. Our guest for this conversation is Eliza Wheeler. But before we talk with Eliza, we want to thank you for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, feel free to subscribe and leave a review of the show. And with that, let's jump into today's episode of French Toast Fridays. Here we go.
This episode of French Toast Fridays is sponsored by Align Coaching, guidance to live in alignment with your purpose and values.
Eliza Wheeler is an illustrator. She's an author and storyteller. Once upon a time, she was a graphic designer. She and her husband live their happily ever afterist in Minneapolis. And as of this moment, she is fulfilling her lifelong dream of being a guest on this podcast. At least we assume that that's what's happening right now. Eliza Wheeler, welcome to French Toast Fridays.
Oh, thank you so much. The dream is coming true.
It's unfolding right now.
Yeah, it's an honor for us to be part of this moment with you.
Thank you.
We have 5 questions that we like to start our interviews with. These are not, you can take these in whatever direction you want. If you want to be really short and to the point, if there's a story this taps into that you just want to get going on, don't let us hold you back.
Sounds good.
What was your first job, first thing that you were paid to do?
Oh, first thing I was paid to do was to work as a cleaner at my grandparents' motel and campground. So this was, we grew up right next door to my grandparents in Solon Springs, Wisconsin. And they owned and ran a little family business, and they were cabins and campgrounds. So I was a cleaner. And as a result of that, I have never been able to separate the taste of beer from a garbage can.
Oh, yeah.
So I do not like beer at all because of the
The skunky smell.
Yeah, the days after unloading garbage cans.
I was imagining when you said that, I didn't know what type of establishment your grandparents were running, but I imagined I know that part of Wisconsin because we have a cabin up there. My parents live there now. A lot of like Busch Light cans and cigarette butts.
A lot of that. There was, it was a funny mix of like vacationers / construction workers would stay in the middle of the week, so you kind of had a range of, messy families to tidy people sometimes.
How old were you? How old were you for that?
I think we started probably earlier than was legal in terms
we
of
don't
like.
Need to put a number on it.
Yeah,
we don't need to put a number, but
don't worry, we won't tell anyone.
They followed official rules in terms of like putting on the payroll, maybe 16, 17,
sure. Gotcha.
Right.
Clean. The starting role was changing the beds.
Oh.
And then you worked up to cleaning bathrooms because you really needed like the spick and span treatment for bathroom cleaning. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a good job.
So young Eliza growing up in Solon Springs, Wisconsin, maybe it's before you started cleaning, but when you think about being a little girl, are there any sort of fears that come to mind that you lived with?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. I think, when I think about my elementary school self or younger, I was a really timid kid, I think, in terms of like I was physically timid, but my imagination was pretty wild, so a little bit more of a like live in my head than my body
Yep.
type of person, which I think is maybe a lifelong thing. But yeah, so I think I I grew up, my cousin Kristen, who is my age, um, we were kind of opposites in that she would just like bolt up a tree or like run barefoot down a gravel road, and I was kind of always like ouching my way behind her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just, I was afraid of the dark. I was
Hmm.
afraid of all the kid things, spiders
So hopefully
and
you
June
never had to
bugs.
clean any of those cabins at night.
Oh yeah,
No, no, it was a daytime job,
it's good.
Sure.
strictly.
That's
Good.
good.
Yes.
Well, I was a scared kid as well. Scared kids become
Aw,
scared adults who hopefully learn to manage their fear
totally. Yeah, maybe
with
it
love
never
and
really
support.
goes away,
Yeah.
but you just cope.
I was
Yeah.
always jealous of the kids that were so brave because it looked like they
Yes,
were enjoying life. And I was like, oh, I wish I could
I
be up in that
know.
tree, or I wish I could be doing that, but it seems scary.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, still.
Yep. Uh, what are your thoughts on aliens?
Oh, probable. I mean, no direct encounters, but there's got to be someone else out there.
Sure.
Seems fair.
Yeah. It's not the answer I was expecting because I'm pretty sure on page 23 of The Grudge Keeper.
Yeah, I didn't write that, so.
That's true. And we didn't ask you your thoughts on dragons.
Right.
Yes.
But you didn't write that one
hopefully.
either. But you did draw
No,
some
yes,
pretty
yes.
convincing dragons.
Which you are an amazing illustrator. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We'll get to
Yeah.
we'll get to all of that because your body of work is quite impressive, and it's very cool stuff.
So improbable on aliens, no direct connections, but there's a possibility.
Yeah.
Probability.
Sounds like
Yeah.
you're very open-minded to
Oh, yeah.
the possibilities.
Yeah. It's a big universe out there.
Yeah, I'd agree. Eliza, what's the best thing that you've done recently that didn't cost any money?
Oh, what's the best thing I've done? Going for walks, it's kind of generic, but I love we live pretty close to Lake of the Isles here in Minneapolis. It's walkable from here. And I realized something special about the city lakes here is that they're all public access and have walking paths around them all. And so it's just wonderful, like to be able to walk around a whole lake and feel nature, even though I'm in a pretty urban area.
Yeah,
So-
Minneapolis and St. Paul does a really good job
Yep.
getting out
there's
there.
a lot of green space.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
lakes.
And I'm looking forward to the hammocking season. I've gotten big into hammocking since moving to Minneapolis from Los Angeles, where it was just like walking around here. People have their hammocks strung up all around in parks, and it was like, what is this wonderful thing? So that did cost money in initial expense, but is free once you
Paid off
put
for
the
itself
money
in dividends now.
Absolutely.
Sarah, my partner, she lived over by Lake of the Isles for quite a while. And during COVID time, when walking became like everybody's favorite hobby, we would go over. There's some green space there, not quite on the lake. And one day we just brought my tent and we set it up. And
Oh,
I think I took a nap. We just laid down. I don't even know why we needed the tent other than just to say. But would you feel comfortable if you set up your hammock actually falling asleep out there?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would. I think it's so. Do you know the Richard Scarry books from like the, I don't know, maybe 70s,
I don't think so.
80s? It's like a kind of busy town, it's a bunch of animals just doing things.
Marco's
And it'll
nodding his head yes.
Yes, it's
He's
very
in.
like just riding bikes all around and following all the characters and their jobs. And when the weather gets nice around here, it looks like a Richard Scarry drawing. It's just like people biking and walking and picnicking and
That's great.
yeah. So it's you kind of feel like, I mean, I think a part of hammocking is the nap because that's just the zone it puts you in.
That
So
is the platform it was intended
Sure.
for.
Yeah, this wasn't for
yes,
exercise.
totally
That's awesome.
Hammocking,
Yeah.
hammocking.
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 I don't even know if that's like official as a verb, but
It is now.
it's
Yeah,
gotta
no,
be.
no, it is.
Yeah.
All right, fifth of the 5 questions. If you gave a TED Talk, and I don't know, you've never given a TED Talk, have you?
No.
Okay. We have other guests who have done at least the regional TEDx talks, but if you gave a TED Talk, what would the topic be?
Oh, I'll probably be thinking about this one for a lot
I wish I would have said that.
Yeah, wait a minute. I think just off the top of my head, I guess I would talk about visual storytelling. And I think the thing that I can really geek out about is in picture books, the relationship between pictures and words and that whole experience and how you can tell so much of the story just in the pictures. And so it's like I think a lifelong part of the craft of illustrating picture books and writing picture books is that um, relationship, developing the craft between words and pictures. Yeah. I can't give you bullet points
No, that's fine.
as to
No.
what exactly I would
If
say.
you find
but-
yourself distracted throughout this and you go, wait, I would add this, just jump in and we'll
Yeah.
kind of workshop this as we go.
You think
Yeah.
about how many kids, though, that you can get through the books just by adding your illustrations. I mean, the way that helps them flow and connect with the story is really amazing.
Well, totally. And I think what's so cool about picture books as an experience is that you have two distinct audiences. You have the parent or caregiver or teacher reading the book, and then the child's experience of the book. They're usually not reading along. They're watching along. So they're reading the pictures, the parents are reading the words. And so it's this great opportunity to like speak the language of the child, and I think like you were asking me the question about my younger self. I think one of the things I'm still really in touch with from my childhood is how I experienced stories, whether that be watching cartoons or reading at story time, reading picture books. But like I've always been a very visually inclined person, and so that's how I experience things, is like seeing first and then I feel things and then I figure out what my thoughts are. So I think the thinking comes a lot later, and some people it's the opposite.
Yeah. One would think our 5 questions that we came up with are just icebreakers, but they really do have meaning. Like going back to the fear piece of you watching that kid bolting up the tree and stuff. I see you just visualizing that and be able to tell that story, through a book. So
I think the ice has been broken and we're now in the water.
we're deep into it. So,
Good, yeah.
But it's a safe place and it's warmer than we thought it would be. So I hope that we're all comfortable
you
in the
led
deep
me
end.
in gracefully.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
it's warmer by you.
Well, Tyler is a lifeguard, I think, so we're going to be all right. Maybe this is just for my own clarity, Eliza, but do you identify more as an illustrator, as an author, or as an illustrator-author?
I would say probably as an illustrator first.
Okay.
I think I like the title storyteller, right? Because it kind of involves both. But in terms of the craft, definitely an illustrator. I think writing has come with the wanting to tell story through illustrations. And so Of the 20 books that I've illustrated, I've only published 2 of my own, and then my next one will be coming out in the fall. So the third, I'm working now on the writing piece, and every time I write, I just remember how hard it is.
I was actually going to ask you, so with the books that you've written and illustrated, do you illustrate those first and then put words to the pictures?
Um, Interestingly, I kind of do the process in tandem. So I probably start writing first, strangely, though. Yeah, it's very back and forth, so it'll be like maybe I'll come up with ideas for what the characters will look like or what the story world will look like. So I'll sketch. But then usually I'm writing out notes about, what order things need to happen in. Picture books are so sequential, and they're built with the page turn. They're built in moments. It's a little different than writing for, say, a novel where you're thinking in terms of baby chapters, or story arc, or over a long period of time. You're really thinking in this kind of short format. And so the writing process has to be like pared down and succinct, and you want to try to find ways of saying things that I don't know, they're like quicker, more pared down.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to gear it towards your audience too, youth.
Exactly.
So, well,
Yeah.
youth
Yeah.
and myself, we only have a short attention span. So these books work really
Yeah.
well for me. So,
Yes. Yeah. They're not children's books, they're
no,
picture books,
they're
right?
everybody's
All
books.
age. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Totally.
Good.
So, what I know about you from what I guess, talking to Tyler and just reading a little bit online and from your website, which I'll assume is all true since it's on your website. If it's on the internet, it's true. But so you were born in Duluth, Minnesota, and then grew up. I don't know if you have any memories in Duluth, but you grew up in Northwest Wisconsin, 2 of my favorite places in the upper Midwest. And I can only imagine that given the landscape, the architecture, the way of life, that they both kind of have this fairy tale story-like setting reality to them. And I realize you spent some time out in Los Angeles and are now in Minneapolis, but looking back on your childhood and the time you spent formative years in those locations or just in that part of the country, what impact do you think those places have had on who you've become and are becoming as a storyteller?
Yeah, I mean, hugely impacted. I think if you look at my own picture books, I can't get the theme of the seasons out of my system at all. Like, I think that'll just be what I create work on for the rest of my life, is seasonal patterns, and nature, right? Both. I mean, I think growing up near Duluth, so I was born at the hospital in Duluth, but grew up about 45 minutes south of there. So Wisconsin, Minnesota border. But growing up near Lake Superior, just weather is such a big deal. And it's a big part of life. And so both Miss Maple's Seeds and Home in the Woods, my 2 picture books, cycle through the seasons. So they, I think, go through all 4 seasons, both of them. And then the current books I'm working on are the one I just finished is called A Cozy Winter Day. And then the one I'm working on now is A Cozy Summer Day, and hopefully I'll be able to do all 4. So it's kind of just basking in a seasonal day.
Well, it's a great way to tell a
So
story, is just going through the seasons.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and I think interestingly, having while we lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, an interesting part of that was like living in a totally different climate. I was really homesick for the seasons. And so I think that homesickness, both Miss Mabel Seeds and Home in the Woods were primarily written while I lived there. And so I think my homesickness for the nature here in the seasons was fueling my needing to experience them,
Right.
through
A
just
season
diving
fix through
in
your
there.
books.
Yeah.
We hear it. I hear it all the time from my friends because I've lived in either Iowa or Minnesota my whole life. And I think between the three of us, we've all spent most of our lives kind of near home, which is in this area. Anyone who's gone somewhere where they have no winter or just a different climate, you hear about it the most at Christmas because it's the whole Christmas Carol, White Christmas stuff.
Mhm.
But fall is awesome.
Oh, so good.
And I would
Yeah.
imagine that you also
Yeah.
miss out on those kinds of
Mhm.
seasons, and
Those-
it feels
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, those transitional times are just so healthy.
Well, they've aligned themselves with transitions in our own lives. Fall, the season is changing, but we're also going back to school as a kid. And
Yeah.
spring is not just before summer, it's before summer break and the new things, the new rhythms of life that we do, the experiences we have. And so it's like it's tracking with our own
Yeah.
growth
Yeah.
and aging as kids. And then you have these things that kind of coincide with all of it, that like the nature, it's like nature's part of it. Whereas if it was like,
Yes.
I think it would be great to live in 75 and sunny every day, but would it? How would I know what
Well,
time of year it is?
yeah, I mean, I would say the time experienced out uh, while living in Southern California was a much more timeless feeling. You don't feel that transition as heavily. Um, Although it's only 75 and sunny if you're right on the coast. So most people live inland from the beach, and so it was more like
I
95
gotcha.
most of the.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I was thinking of the rich people in San Diego, actually, probably.
yeah, that wasn't me, unfortunately.
In my mind's imagination, I would be there, but
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
bank account in reality, I would be where it's really hot and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the seasons there are still seasons unique to that place, and I came to kind of tune to those. They're much subtler, but winter in LA is very it's like rainy and cool and lovely. So yeah, I mean every place has its unique rhythm, but I think something about the rhythm of the seasons that I grew up in, it gets in your bones or something.
Writing and illustrating in LA and writing and illustrating in Minneapolis, are you environmental? Is there less production for creativity in Minneapolis versus LA?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the thing that's maybe almost more distracting here is in the summertime, you just want to be outside all the time, when it's not too hot, which is also a reality here. But I think I try to work a little more seasonally. So in the winter months is when I'm hunkering in and trying to get a lot of my work
So
in.
the work process is definitely that way. How about what derives
Yeah.
creativity for you in some of the stuff that you're doing? Do you find more inspiration in Minneapolis versus LA or vice versa?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think I'm that impacted by the specific location. Usually if I need to like sink in and write and focus, in the past I've done little like week-long or month-long retreats where I'll send myself to an isolated location, usually in nature, and that's always been when I can get a lot of the work done that requires my like being in a kind of a bunker. So yeah, I think maybe what affects me the most in both locations is just busyness of daily life. And that's a highly distractive thing. So I try to really put a lot of parameters around distractions. And yeah, it's just a daily process of kind of being boundaried
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. Well, the whole creative, I mean, in so many authors I've read about, like Moby Dick, I think he had to leave his house to write Moby Dick and then go to like a factory and basically wrote that in a closet with hammering going in the back. And so once that hammering started, it was almost hypnotic for him and he could write out the pages versus being at home and then seeing
Oh,
a
this is
messy
Herman
counter.
Melville.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
right.
wow.
So it's just interesting to hear the stories of how these illustrators and
Yeah.
authors come to be, with the stories. So,
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because everyone's unique, right? Everyone kind of has unique distractions. Like some people I know, they like writing at their dining room table with family kind of coming in and out. Like they like that pattern. And yeah, for me, I would go nuts. So yeah.
Is it true that you spent some time as a graphic designer, that you had gone to school, in fact, and got a degree in graphic design, but left that career? And I don't know how long you actually did it, but because you just couldn't handle being on a computer all the time?
Yes, I mean, so an interesting thing, right, is that um, when you choose your degree, when you're going into college, you're an 18, you're 18, you don't really know what things are. And I think, I mean, I remember a big discussion I wanted to go to school for art. Um, and so the big discussion, of course, with parents is let's study something you can make a living doing after school. So I
Such a good mom
wanted
and
to,
dad question,
yeah,
or, or
I know.
suggestion.
And yes, and I would have probably chosen to just paint and draw. But it was like, okay, maybe go into art education and graphic design was kind of the other choice.
which, how
Um,
hypocritical, because now isn't your dad trying to get art into art galleries and stuff, and he's out painting? God, we
Well,
should call him out on that.
he is a retired
Yeah,
teacher,
okay.
yeah, so
He
we
put
can
his
give
time
him
in.
yeah, he put his time in. But, I knew I didn't wanna be a teacher. Um, I don't know how I knew that, maybe just rebellion because my whole family are teachers, I don't know. I knew I wanted to do the art, not teach the art. And so, yeah, graphic design was kind of a default choice, honestly. And once getting through the program, it was like I loved my painting and drawing classes, and the graphic design classes were like, oh, it's computer programs, and I'm not very tech savvy. And so, yeah, I think, though, I will say for sure, I learned amazing skills that I still use. I mean, doing graphic design, you're learning typography, you're learning technical skills that I've needed. So I think because I'm already a natural drawer painter, it makes sense to learn something in school that is rounding out your skills, right? So I appreciate it now. I don't think I appreciated it much then. And then I found my way back to drawing and painting. So I guess you'll get there either way.
This episode of French Toast Fridays is sponsored by Legacy River Coffee. Legacy River, savoring tradition, one sip at a time.
When all of these books, it seems like you obviously connect with certain authors, and then do multiple projects with those people because you probably formed a relationship, you've enjoyed working with them. How many projects do you get put in front of you and asked to be the illustrator? Do you decide not to? I mean, is it a hefty process?
It's a good question, and I think I have to point to kind of common misconception about children's books, which is that authors and illustrators don't actually work together typically. So the writers of the stories, they write their stories, they're selling their stories to the publisher directly without an illustrator attached. Typically, I mean, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes people work in a pair, and so they'll pitch together. But so when I'm working as an illustrator on an author's project, they've already sold that project to the publisher, and it's the publisher's job to find and connect the illustrator to the story. And I think it's always a little bit of a shock to writers that oftentimes they don't even get to pick who the illustrator is. Sometimes they might be given a short list, like we have 5 illustrators who we're going to send your project to, and they might say, oh, I like these ones the best. But typically, typically I'm getting the projects directly from the publisher. They're sending it to my agent, and then we look at the project. So yeah.
There's a possibility then the author at the final project gets the book, and the pictures and the illustrations had no, like, that wasn't even close to what they were mentally thinking in their head.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so many of the authors that I've illustrated for, I've never met in person. Many of them I don't speak to until the project's finished. And it's kind of the publisher helps to keep them separate, because I think writers have a lot of opinions on what they think it should look like.
Sure.
I mean,
Well,
which
yeah.
is understandable.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
But it's a little bit of the illustrator's a professional. They know how to bring their work to this. And so some of that is a little bit protective for the illustrator's sake of not letting the writer kind of put their foot in where their expertise isn't.
Are you a unique situation in the ones that you've illustrated and authored? Is that
No, so that's also kind of a separate, a common setup if you're an author illustrator. So as an author illustrator, usually you write the manuscript. You're pitching your story in a similar way to someone who is a writer, but usually illustrators include a little sketched out. It's called a book dummy, so it's a sketched
I've been
out
called that.
loose version.
Okay.
Yeah. Tyler knows.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're never turning in anything that's polished and finished. You're just pitching a project, and then the editor and art director are a big part of forming that book. And so that, I think that's also another surprise to people is you're really not, I'm talking traditional publishing, people self-publishing. That's a whole other field and direction to go. But
you could start pitching yourself. This could be new. This could be cutting edge, but you could call yourself like the trifecta and say you're a publisher, illustrator, and you'd read your own audiobook.
Do they do audiobooks of shorter books like this?
Not that I know of,
Really?
actually.
This could be it. This could be our thing.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they'll do like kind of read aloud ebook versions.
Then I would imagine it would be in the book, because the kid would still want to see the images and even like to see the words and to kind of do that.
Yeah.
But it's like the one that I would give my nieces for Christmas, where I could record myself reading it. And then as they flip the page, it's me reading it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, it's your voice. Yeah.
Cool.
Good.
Well, the section heading for this next question, I'm going to call Agents and Awards and Publishers, oh my. Because, so you had probably the more like professional career, like traditional career that your parents and others would want or expect of you when you were the graphic designer, right? You probably had like health insurance and all those kinds of things.
For the most part, yeah.
And then you shift into this, and I don't know how quickly, if you just went full sail into it or if you kind of eased in and then eventually let go of the other job when you felt like this was going to be something you could do. But you go into this world where all of a sudden now you have a success where you can be represented by an agent. You have the publishing world, which you got to know about. Some of that probably was really helpful, and some of it was kind of like, really? That's how it works, you know?
Yeah.
And then you have some success awards. So, I mean, Miss Maple's Seeds here, which you wrote and illustrated, which was on the New York Times bestseller list. Do you remember where you were or how you found out that that was a bestseller?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was utterly shocking because it was my debut book. Um, you just have this feeling like, oh, okay, my friends and family can go to a store and buy this book. And I got a random, it was a tweet actually. Someone tweeted at me a congratulations, and they said on the NYT list. And I was like, I know NYT means New York Times, but surely that's not what they mean. So I'm like Googling what are other because it just seemed impossible. And then my editor called me on the phone, and she was in the quiet car of a train after work leaving New York, and she was getting shushed as we were both excitedly, she's telling me that Miss Maple Seeds had gotten on the New York Times bestseller list. And it was like, I think the main thought was like, other people are buying this, surely, if it's not just my friends and family. Although I have a lot of cousins, but
We've got a good collection.
yeah, not enough to push it that far. So I mean, yeah, that was just incredible.
Well, that's great. I mean, congratulations. I know it's maybe it's sunk in by now, but what an incredible achievement. I would imagine that it does feel kind of surreal still, and maybe it opens some
Yeah.
doors, and maybe it also puts certain pressure on, but I'm sure it's something that, you did this to share stories and some level of success as it's, related to things like the New York Times bestseller list are markers of that success. But I'm guessing that, you'd feel just as purposeful and fulfilled in your work, just as happy with it, even if that had never happened.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's always a bit of a push-pull with the reception of the work you've done, right? Like I think, and I know of a lot of people who get really obsessed with sales numbers and reviews and that kind of stuff. And I generally don't like to know about them. I mean, it's like, oh, if I'm going to be super excited about the good stuff, I I don't want to be equally devastated about bad reviews or whatever. I mean, I just kind of try to tune most of it out. But I do love the thing I love the most is like when parents send the responses of their kids to the book. Like that never ever gets old. It will never get old. Pictures of kids reading your books. I mean, just to like see, because making the book is such a solitary thing. I'm not really connecting with the audiences too much. And so I just love that. The seeing pictures and the response and all that is so cool.
I should start sending you pictures when we're in Borders and we see your book. We just put the entire stack up in front of all of the other books so no one can buy anything. It's figures.
Well, you can join my dad in
That's
that.
right. Yep.
All right. Another heading, because I got excited about this. This one, if it was on Sesame Street, it would be brought to you by the letter F. Mm-hmm. Facts, fiction, and family. I watched the video on your website, the behind the book on Home in the Woods, which was you wrote and illustrated that book about your grandma's life, her childhood in northern Wisconsin during the Depression. No spoilers. I haven't read it, but I didn't want to say too much about it for those that haven't read it yet. But I was especially struck by the section of this video where the background music fades out for maybe like a minute, and all we see are close-ups of you drawing, and all we hear is the sound of your pencils and your paintbrushes. It's beautifully done. It actually reminds me of some of Marco's videography work that kind of it's multi-sensory in a way. And in addition, in that video to you talking about the difficulty of capturing the spirit of the story of your grandmother and her family
Yeah.
without rewriting family history, right? Like you had access to certain stories and writings and photos and whatever else. There's a historical context, there's geographical kinds of resources available. But in addition to kind of trying to wrestle the story to feel true, whatever true means for the sake of that, you also express this sense that you seem to have felt when creating the images for any of your books. And the way that you articulated it, you said that so much of the illustration work is about trying to capture how something feels. And I have long believed, as more of like a storyteller publicly, like speaking, I've long felt that words and stories have power. I don't think that you would disagree with that. And that if you add images, illustrations, whether it's video or the kinds of creative artwork that you do, it's even more powerful because you now have another sense of, now you can see those characters and that world that they've created. And yes, maybe it lacks just like what your brain creates in your imagination if you're just reading the words. But if words and stories have power and you add the illustrations like the ones you create, and it's even more powerful from your experiencing as both a story creator and a story consumer, because I'm guessing you also read and consume stories in other ways. What are your thoughts on what makes a story great? And great could be defined as memorable or inspiring. It could be relatable. It could touch on emotion, however you would kind of interpret what it means for the story to be great. But and maybe using Home in the Woods as maybe the space where you got to experience some of this.
Yeah, that's an easier frame to put it in because I mean, telling great stories, that's kind of always the whale we're chasing as storytellers is, how to m- how to tell great stories is unique to each story that you're telling, right? And so yeah, with Home in the Woods, I mean, I it took me 6 years to write it. This is a 30, 38, 40-page picture book, you know, maybe 1,000 words or less. And it took me 6 years. And that's exactly because of all of the storytelling required in there. When I first started writing it, I was using too many words and I was trying to overtell the story, and I wasn't doing it that story is told from 6-year-old Marvel's perspective. So we're in her first person point of view, and it's also present tense. So everything that's unfolding in the story is happening now. Even though it's a historic, it happened in the 30s. It took me a long time to come to those two things and the importance of telling that story, because when I was telling it from the, telling it in past tense, it just sounded really bad. It was like overtold. It sounded kind of saccharine or preachy, or it was just saying too much that the illustrations needed to be able to tell. And so it took me a while to come to those important things, and the text was like keeping it immediate and making the point of view be from the child, not from some adult perspective, right? Because the last thing kids want is to be lectured to, and so I think hearing the story from that perspective makes you see everything. It's sensory, right? It's like, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're smelling, here's what it feels like in the change of these seasons in this location. And so I think that's part of what a great story does, is it transports you to a time and a place And I think, like you were saying, that, that video, which I have to give credit to my husband, Adam, because he's the one that made that behind the books video. But that's that moment that you were talking about where it's just the sounds of the brushes and the pencils. It must have transported you into my workspace with me, and so you're hearing and seeing everything as it's happening. And so I think that's a big piece of storytelling that you'll hear often is show, don't tell. Don't tell us what's going on, show us um, in the storytelling. And that's always part of that craft of how do I, with each story, immerse the person into this book. And it's really cool to hear responses from I've gotten letters from parents who have said, like, I gave, my the a grandparent gave this book to my kid, and they were kind of like, "Oh, a book," and then they would kind of tell me how the book won them over, the child reader. And I think I wasn't a reader as a kid, and so I know how to speak to a non-reader with through the visuals, because you just have to create interest and give them something that they can read that's not just the parent talking at them. So, yeah, that's kind of that dance between the words and the pictures that I get obsessed with.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, the pictures, I mean, they suck you in so much, and without even the words, you could almost tell your own story.
Yeah, yeah, and some illustrators do. They'll do wordless picture books. I don't know if you've come across any of those, but that can be fun to just let a child have a book and it's all told through pictures. But I haven't tackled that format.
That may be my introduction into the industry. Just a wordless book.
Yeah,
That might be what I
but
put
no
out there.
illustrations
Maybe
either.
not even illustrations. It's like choose your own adventure.
There's a
Yeah.
whole section actually at the store. They're called notebooks.
Oh,
You can buy them already.
published by Tyler McCarty.
Yeah, that's
Blank
great.
space.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we always invite our guests to do, Eliza, and I think that we gave you a heads up about this, is there are causes, issues, organizations doing incredible things out in the world that you probably care about and support. And as a thank you for being on the show, we want to be able to, give them a little promotion, and also give a gift to them in your honor to celebrate
Yeah.
something that you care about. So what is it that you'd like us and our listeners to know about?
Yeah, that's so lovely. It's great that you do that. So my organization that I would love to highlight is a local to Minneapolis. It's called the Queer Space Collective, and they're all about giving LGBTQ plus youth access to mentors and to community that helps them feel safe and supported. We've learned that suicide rates for LGBTQ teens are way higher than other teens, due to the isolating experience that they go through. And so having connection and spaces to community mentors that just help guide them through the experience and give them support and make them feel empowered to be their unique selves. So that's here in Minneapolis, queerspacecollective.org.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. We will, on our website, have that information. We will include links to, I believe it's wheelerstudio.com. So WHEELER studio.com to see more of your work, learn more about you. It sounds like you have a book coming out this fall, so I'm guessing there will be
Yes.
some information about that.
Yeah.
will probably post that behind the book video, that it's fun to hear that your husband was the one who did
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah,
But
thanks for bringing that up. I always warn people it's 13 minutes, so
Yeah.
save it for a lunch break.
Yeah.
It's not a good like scrolling content.
It really didn't seem like 30. That just says how much you actually do get sucked in, because
Yep.
it didn't seem like 13 minutes.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's good.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Well, all the congrats in the world for your accomplishments and for the stories that you have yet to tell that maybe are just floating around somewhere in your subconscious that are lacking the words and the images for. But we trust that you will continue sharing those, and that for the kids who love books and those who don't, may they find your stories and find some sort of hope and imagination and interest in them. Thanks for your time telling us a little bit about your story. We're glad to know you're in the world doing your thing.
Oh, thanks so much for the great questions and for letting me share. That's awesome.
This is really great. Thanks, Eliza.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Take care. This episode of French Toast Fridays is sponsored by Oak and Glen, a creative studio with a passion for visual storytelling. What's up, Toasties? Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest or anything we talked about, visit the show page on FrenchToastFridays.com. We believe that a lot of people have great stories that are worth telling, and we plan on continuing to do this. So if you know someone who would be a great guest, or if you want to be a sponsor on the show, please send us a note at FrenchToastPod@gmail.com. And always remember, life is best when it's simple and sincere with plenty of syrup.